Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, everybody who has come out and spoken to us. There's been a lot of passion, a lot of intelligent discourse, and a lot of commitment and involvement, and that's a good thing. It's unfortunate it wasn't more, I guess, cooperative and coming together, but that happens. I treasure recreation and sport, played them all my life, including today, and I'm well aware of the health benefits and other advantages of them. But there are quite a number of relevant concerns with this particular proposal. First of all, there is, in my view, and I use it frequently, a negative impact on the trail usage. I think there's no question about that. And that's a large user group in Saanich, and that's an undesirable thing. There is an impact on the Cedar Hill Arts Center, which we put a lot of money into in recent times, and I had a fair amount of involvement in the design of that, and actually was responsible in part for encouraging it to be designed to be open to the open area and to be able to take advantage of that in the future. That would be lost. There isn't a potential impact on the facilities. This is, with 8 courts, I think this is designed for tournament use. You know, if there is fairly heavy tournament use, that is a considerable problem for us in terms of a center that is fairly maxed out in terms of parking and so forth during that time of year. And most importantly, as many people have indicated, there are environmental concerns here. One of those concerns is with the Bowker Creek Initiative. We, unfortunately, in past decisions for a long time, not this council, but many councils, have created watersheds that don't function very well anymore. We have piped water courses, we have covered the watersheds with impervious surfaces, and that's to our detriment, and actually a major source of pollution in our receiving waters in the ocean. We need to change that, and we realize that in the Bowker Creek watershed, and thanks to a lot of efforts on the part of volunteers, we have a 100-year plan for it. And we need to observe that plan, and we need to accomplish it. This site is one of the potentially most important areas in the Bowker Creek watershed because it is a place where things can be reestablished without too much effort. Places where it is piped underground, places where it is covered by a building, that's much, much harder to do anything about. I don't think this proposal adequately addresses that. We might not want to keep that creek as a straight ditch or even a straight, somewhat rehabilitated course. We might want to meander the creek. We might want to reestablish wetlands and reestablish habitat. We might need this creek area very much, as one person pointed out, as a storage of stormwater. The creek already floods, and there are problems downstream. With climate change, that's likely to get more severe. Those kinds of things have to be investigated, in my view, before we make a decision of how we're going to use that land. How can we optimize the Bowker Creek watershed plan in this area? Has to be a prime concern. I think there may be environmental concerns in terms of the clay court surface. Like others, I took the time to do some research and found that in maintenance of clay courts, you regularly replace large amounts of the surface material. It seems that's something that just has to happen. Well, that material goes somewhere. Some of it could be caught in a detention pond, but quite likely not all of it. What's the impact of that? A lot of sites did point out that these clay courts are subject to fungus and mildew, especially in this kind of climate. How is that going to be handled? I found the application, unfortunately, very thin in terms of the description. It said, we'll do best practices. Well, what is that, and what does it involve? I need to know that prior to my approving any such thing. I have to look at the financial concerns. And to start with, I have to look and say, I would expect a comprehensive financial market analysis to come before me. and I haven't had it. I've got says that some people have committed to the project, and that's really good, and others have expressed interest. I think the project would be all right in terms of capital investment, accomplishing it by themselves with the municipal input of money and support, but I don't know about the operation. And unless I have some kind of guarantee that it will operate successfully, who picks up the pieces? The municipality does. And that's potentially problematic. I need to know that it's a good deal for Saanich. We would be investing a lot, $100,000, the interest-free loan, and the provision of land. And the provision of land is a very, very considerable financial amenity. I, like others, I guess, calculated the return in terms of court time, and I came at somewhere around 7 or 8%. I don't find that sufficient to make it a good deal for the municipality. The squash courts with their booking system, and I checked with them, I'm a squash court member there and play regularly. They make available to the public about 30 to 40% of the court time. And the only advantage I have as a member is booking 1 day ahead of what the public does. So that's a concern. But the biggest concern for me is the issue of process. We will not be able to have a comprehensive master plan for every park in Saanich in the near future. We just don't have the resources, and it will take considerable time if we do have the resources. It's not something you accomplish in 2 or 6 months. It's usually a process that involves a couple of years for a park. So we have to be very aware of, and I think, I'm not trying to blame anybody here at all, I think we need to have a policy in effect that essentially says, if we are going to make a substantive change to a piece of public land, then that has to trigger a public process. The public owns the land. Council and staff manage it on behalf of the public. There are many things that we'll do, and we don't have to do a lot of consultation because there are small changes, and they are well within what we would expect in normal operation or even in progress and change. But this is not a small change. And that type of thing needs to, I think, when you're going to change a fairly large piece of land, you have to start by saying, okay, boom, switch goes off. We are opening that up to the public process to see what the public wants to do with this land. We have to start there, always. Not, this is what we're going to do with it and what do you think, but what should we do in this area? What is the public concern? So looking at all those things, I am going to have to move that we not support the application in front of us. I do regret for the society. I think they have an excellent idea. I hope it is accomplished at some point. They have put in an awful lot of effort, but we should have had that broader process prior to it getting here and prior to them having to undertake all that effort before they knew whether or not it was started. So I so shall move. Thank you.
It's been moved that it not be supported. Is there a seconder? I hear a seconder. Thank you. I have a speaking order of Councillor Brice, Gerrard, Murdoch, and Wade. Sanders, boom, boom. So Councillor Brice.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you all who have come out over these meetings to share your expertise and your heartfelt passion about this particular issue. After 183 speakers and more than a dozen hours, you know, one always hopes that out of the sky is going to fall the perfect solution that is going to bring the community together, because it really has been. Unfortunately, even though I must say I'm very impressed with the decorum at these meetings, but I know out there in the community, out there in the neighborhoods where there are strong differences of opinion, it is a challenge. However, I will cut to the chase and tell you that after considerable public debate on this proposal, I have come to the conclusion that I will not be supporting the proposal of the Cedar Hill Clay Courts Tennis Society. Having taken that position, I will say that I was very impressed with the passionate and serious proposal from the Society and from the tennis players in our community who desperately hoped that this would come to pass. However, several significant aspects of the proposal cannot be ignored. One is financial. Notwithstanding staff's projections for revenue, or at least the Society's projections for revenue, the request for a $100,000 grant and a $250,000 interest-free loan are not supportable. The lack of tennis courts in Saanich and even in Greater Victoria has not previously been identified to me as a member of your council as a high priority, as something lacking currently in our community. Even though the clay surface would be a unique addition to the regional recreation offering, some serious tennis players in other areas caution, and I know I have spoken with folks at the Jericho Club in Vancouver, that they had clay courts and have removed them because of the significant grooming requirements and considerable amount of upkeep. There was always downtime for the courts that were not in use as they were being brushed. I'm concerned about the long-term financial viability of the project and the consequences to Saanich if membership to the societies aren't realized. It's always at the time of enthusiasm and people wanting to get something going that's the easiest group it is to sign up to these things. Having been a lifelong Victoria resident, I was there when the Racket Club first started up, and I was one of the people who put my $500 up. And I hardly had $500, but I put it up because I was so enthusiastic and I'm a tennis player. However, over time, that club was not able to maintain its financial viability. On the environmental issues, as stated in the staff report, the Society's proposal presents both benefits and challenges for the community. Challenges that I see are the loss of open public space and watershed potential, and the loss of space in parks for unstructured play. And I think each of us is becoming more and more aware of what is referred to as the environmental deficit of our young people and the need just to be outside in nature, sometimes not with a specific activity, with rules and regulations and people telling you how you're to play it, just being out and enjoying themselves. So the space in question is highly desirable because of its proximity to Cedar Hill Recreation Centre with washrooms and other amenities. The fact that this space has not yet been developed to any significant degree does not concern me. I mean, how self-centered are we to think that just in our little teeny-weeny time here, every single piece of space has to be identified for a specific use? There's lots of time to come, lots of good ideas. There will be many opportunities in the future to evaluate the community's parks and recreations needs, and this will always be a prime piece of land. To the enthusiastic tennis players in our community who have worked hard on this project and who vigorously shared their passion in hopes of achieving this facility, I say I am not turning this down because of any lack of appreciation for tennis as a wonderful lifelong activity. I have been very involved in the sporting community over the years, and I have seen the power of enthusiasts achieve their dreams. For many of you, I am sure you thought this dream would succeed. I don't know if it will, but it can't get my support this time. But I think this is not the location that is in the best interest of the whole community for the long term. I want to thank the people who have come out to our meetings, who have sent emails, and have spent time discussing your points of view on this matter with me.
Thank you, Councillor Gerrard. Then Murdoch.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you all for coming and sharing your emotions. I'll try and keep my emotions down and just deal with a reasonable judgment. This is a controversial proposal that has generated these 3 public meetings and many emails, both pro and con, and I've read them all, ranging from the immediate community, other Saanich residents, and people from outside of Saanich. There are many reasons that I cannot support this application. There have been open houses held with an opportunity for feedback from the community, and a resident survey found that only a small percentage of Saanich residents are not satisfied with existing tennis facilities, and only a small percentage place tennis as a high sports priority. Also, our Saanich Parks master plan speaks to the preservation of open green space and does not identify a need for more tennis facilities in Saanich. I'm not convinced of the soundness of the business plan, and if this project were to fail, Saanich will be left with a specific use facility to maintain at a considerable annual cost. I'm a strong supporter of amateur sports and usually vote in favour of funding partnerships that I consider to be a major benefit to Saanich sports communities. For example, soccer, rugby, baseball, lacrosse, rowing, swimming, squash, and indeed tennis. However, I am concerned that we're being asked to support a sports model that primarily benefits a non-profit and private club. There has to be a compelling reason to lose green space where there is a little benefit to the majority of Saanich residents. We've also been asked for a $250,000 interest-free loan and a $100,000 grant in exchange for 1,500 hours of court time for public use. And in my opinion, a strong case has not been made for either the funding or the public benefit to Saanich that would accrue from an 8-court tennis facility on this site. Saanich has also endorsed the Bowker Creek Initiative, a 100-year plan for the restoration of Bowker Creek. There are obvious concerns around the protection of the creek if this facility goes in, and I am not convinced of the environmental safeguards in this plan. However, I have visited this site every couple of weeks for the last year, and I observed 2 underutilized ball fields in very poor condition, subject to being waterlogged, and an open green space that is not well used by the public, despite the claims of some, except for the chip trail. I respect the efforts of the Pulling Together group, but Reach 17 of Bowker Creek is in a sorry state, overgrown with invasive species, pop and beer cans and food wrappers in the creek. So if we turn down this proposal, I would suggest there needs to be more interaction with the community and our staff on forming a working relationship and a vision for what could be done to invigorate this underused green space. In other areas, such as the Gorge Tillicum area where I live, the neighbourhood has partnered with Saanich in developing and cleaning up local parks, the Gorge Waterway, and the Colquitch River, and taking ownership of their community. And I think this is something that this community has to do. It has to take ownership of this green space. Sometimes we have to take a stand when we review proposals that may not be in the best interests of all of Saanich and our communities. So I wish the tennis club good luck in the future. I just cannot support it going in this location.
Councillor Murdoch, followed by Councillor Wade.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And thank you to all of you, those of you who've stuck through this for 3 long meetings and probably attended many more meetings in kitchens, in open houses, at the rec center. This has been a discussion for a long time, and we've been receiving emails and phone calls about this for a long time. But I want to thank in particular the 184 people who came and spent a long time in line to come and tell us their concerns, share their support, or their opposition. I think the dialogue's been respectful for the most part and patient, and I think that is that speaks volumes for the folks who've been affected by this on either side. And I thank you for being respectful and for being patient. I don't think you're going to hear any of the councillors complaining that nobody comes to our meetings anymore. I want to thank the Society and the volunteers for the tremendous amount of effort that went into this proposal and the years of planning and effort that went into advancing their proposal. Obviously, it appears it's reached the end of the road today, but I don't want you to walk away feeling that that effort was for naught. Clearly there's passion. Clearly there's a desire for facilities. And I know that that energy can be directed to making that work, perhaps in Saanich, perhaps somewhere in this region. Clearly that can be put to good use, and I don't want you to feel discouraged. I also want to thank our staff for making the extraordinary effort of putting these 3 meetings together. I know logistically it is an enormous challenge just to corral the 9 of us to show up. Never mind trying to make sure that everybody who wants the chance to speak gets the chance to speak, whether that's done with speakers' cards or keeping track of those who've had the opportunity to speak. So I thank them for that effort. You know, there have been a number of speakers who said this is not about tennis, this is about land use. And I think that's absolutely right. Without consideration of the business plan and the number of concerns, environmental, financial, social, that may be arising from them, it goes back to the question of process, which I think is the heart of this issue. It was Pam Sinclair who I think said it best. If you wanted more activities at the park, you could have come and asked us for some ideas. And I think that's absolutely right. This I view as an opportunity for a reset. What's clear is there's a lot of interest, a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm, and a lot of effort that folks are prepared to dedicate toward this park. And I think that we need to channel that effort and that energy to put it to good use and to come up with what folks have called for, which is a plan for this space. I agree with those who've said, who've observed that this, the portion of this property that we've been discussing probably needs a bit of work and appears to be somewhat neglected. So let's put it to good use and let's talk about, in an open conversation, about what that possible use can be. And I think that that's where this process should have started. I regret the divisiveness. I regret that the acrimony, but I do thank you for keeping it respectful, and I thank you for being patient. So this is an opportunity for us to mend fences. Let's put our heads together, and let's come up with something that's to the benefit of everyone.
Councillor Wade, followed by Councillor Sanders.
Thank you. I can say that on this issue, I have had more traffic and communications than any other issue at all in my entire experience on this council and previous councils. That communication has been thoughtful. It has been important to me. It's helped feed my need for the flavor of the community. And I'm so grateful that you folks have come out and did reach out to us to let us know what works for you and what doesn't. When it comes to effective use of municipal funds, and that means effective use of tax dollars, I think public-private partnerships are a very, very strong and effective tool. So I'm not swayed by the argument that we should not enter into these public-private partnerships, nor am I swayed by the argument that some would say we would have been doing this for an elitist sport. I currently compete in what most folks would consider to be an elitist sport. I am an equestrian, and I have regularly benefited by the public-private partnership that we have in place at the Elk Lake Beaver Lake Equestrian Society. But I would point out what is different there is the fact that those gates are open for anybody to use whenever that facility is not in use. I struggle with that piece of this proposal, that the partnership allocates a certain amount for public use, but even in the last hours, we've heard that perhaps even the proponents felt that that wasn't enough. But really, the reason that I am going to vote not in favor of this today is really the significant issue that I have that I believe is there, and that is the issue of the Special Olympics. We've been talking about this proposal, and there's been much going on for well over a year now, arguably a couple of years. And in that whole time, we still haven't found a way to accommodate those folks who are our most vulnerable in our society. And if we are still only talking about best efforts to accommodate our vulnerable folks, then I can't propose that this goes forward. It is profoundly important to me that we find ways to integrate all folks in society into all recreation and community. And this, I feel, is the fatal flaw. So I do hope we go back, that we find a way to make sure that we do encourage folks to come forward with public-private partnerships. But we need to respect the fact that we already have some partnerships, and we need to maintain those.
Councillor Sanders, followed by Councillor Brownoff.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I also want to thank everyone for being here and spending the last 2 years sending in emails and information, actually from both sides, for and against. It's taken a lot of energy, and if perhaps if we'd had our process at the beginning, I know it wouldn't have had to come into this length of time. As a council watcher and then as a councillor, I too have never seen a process that has taken so many hours, so many speakers, and so much energy. And I appreciate the fact that you all care, both the tennis people, about your passion for tennis and the community about your passion for your park. I appreciate that. I respect the people's love of tennis. My parents were tennis players during the 20s and 30s at Victoria Lawn and Tennis Club, and it was, too, a great passion for them. And when you read the history of that, you can see how Victoria produced some very worldwide tennis players. But however, I was actually born in Oak Bay and lived on the same street as the Oak Bay Tennis Club, and there was never anybody playing tennis when I was young. Went on, graduated from Mount Douglas High School, there were tennis courts there. Nobody ever played tennis. So like every sport, it becomes cyclical. And now tennis is booming. We've seen some world champions and such, and everybody has a passion for it. So I can understand the desire to have our children, my grandchildren, become tennis players and become world renowned. However, my role here as a councillor is to look at this as a land use issue, because that is what it is. It is a land use issue like any development. Last Thursday, there was a speaker that said, "Are you convinced that this is the best option in the long term? Are you convinced this is the best interest for Saanich? Are you convinced this is the best opportunity? Are you convinced that this will be best for the future generations?" And that really stuck with me and made me think about those are the things to consider. So like any proposal, the onus of proof is upon the opponent to convince me that this is the best thing to address all those issues. This is the best for everybody. And I haven't heard that. What I've heard that is great for your health, I've actually got a sore knee, so I'm thinking maybe I need a clay court, tennis court, that would help me. I don't think that will be the answer. I heard a lot of passion about health and tennis, but there was nothing in the proposal from the proponent that convinced me that this was the best use of the green space at Cedar Hill Park. The business plan didn't measure up for me. I thank all the people in the public that took the time and did the research and provided me with economic reports and how many hours we'd need and how many members they would need and such to make this a viable business. But that wasn't in the application. When I first saw this plan, my immediate response from seeing the overview is, that's a bigger footprint than the whole rec center. And I found that astonishing, that there would be no green space basically left. The footprint was large. The comparison to the squash or the lawn bowling, again, I love these aerial maps that we have on our GIS. The squash court, the 4 squash courts are only the size of 1 tennis court. The lawn bowling, its footprint is the same size as the tennis courts at Reynolds Park. That's 2 tennis courts. These were 8 tennis courts and a very large size, also including a 2-story pavilion, which would be completely out of context in the natural areas of Cedar Hill Park. I didn't have any substantial proof that there was a big demand for this, and there was nothing in the proposal that adequately addressed the environmental impacts to the park, but particularly to Boker Creek. The Boker Creek Initiative, the 100-year plan, we as a council have adopted that, and there are plans for this area of Cedar Hill Park, which is called Reach Number 7. It is part of the master drainage plan to hold back the waters so that there isn't flooding down into Oak Bay and into Victoria. And that's important that we respect that and not do something that will actually impact it. When this proposal came before the Environmental Advisory Committee when I was the chair, again, people are supportive of the tennis, but they said it was the wrong location. There was far too many environmental impacts, and they suggested the proponent look for another site. So it was supportive, but again, just the wrong location. If we look at the Cedar Hill precinct, we'll call it, because it is a park, but the precinct is the golf course. It's got the Saanich Volunteer Services with McCrae House, the Recreation Center, which includes the fitness center, the tennis, the squash, the New Horizons Senior, and of course the Arts Center. The Arts Center that is just in its infancy. It hasn't had its opportunity to grow to the potential what that will bring into Saanich in the future. I was a member of Carol Pickett's advisory committee as the Arts Committee before I was a councillor, and that is where that seed came from to have an arts centre. And we planned and grew, and it was wonderful as a councillor that I saw that come through to fruition, and it was designed to take advantage of that green space. The studio doors open up there so the artists can paint and enjoy that space as well. This proposal would change that in its entirety. For now, this is the time to let the Arts Centre grow and to prosper and see where it's going. I found interesting several weeks ago that there were parents that lined up and camped over the weekend to have their children enrolled in a nature kindergarten. These are parents that want their children to experience being in the outdoors. Parents are now looking at more imaginative natural play rather than structured, organized play, and children are enjoying that. And this is what that green space provides. This is a multi-use space. It is the only flat space in Cedar Hill Park. And I also think we need to respect the fact that there have been two gentlemen that got an environmental award for the work that they have done in Cedar Hill Park and have done a lion's share to improve the natural areas on the slope and to consider that we would even look at building something into that seems to be a step backwards and also, I would say, sort of an insult to those that have done the work. The comment was made this morning about the disruption of the balance of nature and weighing all this out, both the future plans and those words that were said. Are you convinced that this is the best option? And no, I am not convinced. So I will not be supporting this proposal. I appreciate the work that the tennis people have done, and I wish them well in finding a site that's more appropriate. I am also pleased to see that the Cedar Hill residents have met each other, joined together, and I always say that the joining together, have us a potluck, because that's the elixir of community spirit. So I won't be supporting this. Thank you.
Councillor Brownoff, followed by Councillor Wergeland.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's been a very interesting process, and I want to recognize the Clay Court Society proponents and their supporters. When this process started, I wanted to be quite neutral. I wanted to step back as a councillor, and I wanted the proponents and the community to speak, and I wanted that process to happen. I did go to the first open house and had my name tag on, and people came up to me. And I must tell you, mother and daughter came up to me and asked me how I was going to vote for the clay tennis courts. It was going to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. And then I went around and I asked one of the society members, he was standing at a board, and I was asking him about affordability. What sort of program would you be putting in place? This is going to be on public land in Saanich, and we have a real keen interest on healthy communities. And what's the affordability issue? Back then, he said they were offering us 500 hours. And, I don't play tennis. I used to, squash, but... so I put that in my back of my head there, and then I went to another person, and I said, so tell me about the Bowker Creek. How are you going to manage? Saanich Council has adopted a 100-year management plan. What's your take on that? And they had some things that they had initially, and then they came up with that they were going to put $20,000 towards it. But the other one that was really key to me is a lot of people said to me, why do they need 8 tennis courts? And so I asked a couple of them, I said, so with having these many tennis courts, are you going to have tournaments, competition? I tell you, there was a little bit of a stutter there. And finally, a couple of them said, yes, we will have a few. And so then I said to them, you know what? You need to be able to tell me how you're going to manage the traffic, because Cedar Hill does not have enough parking. When we have events at Cedar Hill now, the parking is over the top. And Saanich, when we have events at Commonwealth, we have to manage where people are going to park and buses and things like that. So they didn't have that. And I want to say that, for me, I've sat here for a number of years, and I know we're all excited when our Canadian athletes get into that international platform and forum, like our athletes at Commonwealth Place or our rowers at Elk Lake. It's very exciting to see Canadians showcase. And I see now that we have some Canadian tennis players also showing up in some of these international areas. So it's exciting for us. And I have to tell you, my nephew belongs to the Claremont tennis team, which I didn't even know was at Claremont. So obviously tennis is out there, and I know it. And that's probably why Saanich has, I think someone said 35 public courts spread throughout our neighborhoods. So it's definitely a sport within Saanich. Now, I want to recognize the community members. Your passion and energy and the research, all those documents were very valuable. I had done some online as well and talked to other people, but it's nothing less than I would have expected for Saanich residents. You are very passionate about green space and your parks and recreation facilities. There was a comment about from the community members that we shouldn't be investing any taxpayer dollars in it. And it's interesting because when I first saw it, I thought, well, grants are not guaranteed. And I can tell you right now, as Saanich Council, we have been cutting back on grants. We are in financial management of managing our budget and our financial plan, and every year we've been pulling back on people's grant applications. So this $100,000 grant was a concern to me. It's not a given. Now, the $250,000 interest-free loan, we have done this in the past. That's absolutely right. The last one I remember is when the soccer groups were trying to get artificial turf installed on some of the fields. And we did an evaluation. And for Saanich, it was a benefit because we wouldn't have the maintenance issue of natural groundworks to keep up with. So the artificial turf was seen as a positive. And so, yes, we have given these out, but they are paid back over time, and their financials are provided to our finance department annually. And so we stay on top of that, and those loans are paid off. So we have done that. For me, balancing, we have to balance all the users in our recreation and park system. It's what makes Saanich a healthy community. There's not one stronger than the other. It's balancing all users. And we've had many partnerships over the years. I think I can relate back to Perks Arena. Some of you may remember. I think I was fairly new on council, and we again had a group of people who wanted Saanich to invest in more ice. And we did similar meetings, but we also formed a committee, and we went out, chaired by a councillor, and we went out and talked to the people. And as you can see, Perks was not introduced as a P3. We felt that there were too many issues for the public usage of the ice time. So Saanich actually did pay for that with a grant, and I can't even remember what fund that came out of. So I think it's fair to say we do these partnerships on a regular basis, and they're very important to be able to get new things accomplished. You know, I've never believed that it's them and us, and I know there's some people who keep saying it's them and us. I think what you have to appreciate is that Saanich residents have always been welcoming to regional people. We've got lots of you coming into our town, and we don't say, take a number, get out. What our residents say is, we welcome you. But I think it's fair to say that for Saanich residents, we accept the idea of a diversity of opportunities within Saanich. So the whole idea of active living, well, active living for some may just be the walk around the trip trail. For others, I think there was a fellow who said, I just like to lie down and look up at the sky. And you know, kids would be like that as well. There's opportunity around swimming, working out, cycling, playing tennis, obviously, and squash, even bird watching up on top of Mount Doug Park. So Saanich has to be open to listening to all sorts of opportunities, but there has to be a process. I want to thank the people who really raised some of the issues around the Special Olympics and the use of that space. But I think that's where some of the real concerns came for me, is that the Special Olympics and our current users of this space, including the teacher from Mount Doug who talked about the cross country, it should have started with those discussions first. And I'm disappointed it didn't, because I do believe that the Tennis Society did what they were asked to do by our staff. I do believe you went out and did what you were asked. I've always supported that there should be a management plan. We do them at the CRD on major parks, and I'm not saying every park in Saanich needs a management plan, because we got some, you know, just wild parks. But I do believe some of these ones, and I've always talked about the Cedar Hill Recreation Precinct after the golf course restaurant issue. I do believe that this is one of those parks that needs some sort of management plan and a process adopted around how, if someone comes forward with another opportunity, that there's a definite process followed that engages the community first. You know, I just participated in Reconciliation Canada workshop the other day, and one of the things the First Nations said to us was, you know, you've got to start with respect, and you've got to ask us. And I think that that's where this whole process really fell down in my estimation. So, you know, like my other councillors, you know, council adopted a 100-year management plan for Bowker Creek that I didn't think was explored in enough detail. I was very skeptical of the financial plan. I know there's a sense that, well, as it goes along, we could make it more fuller, but I wasn't too keen on it. I thought there were some real things lacking. And the transportation issue, when I asked for a TDM, what we got was a trip generator report. Well, it's really interesting to do a trip generator around open space and lying on your back. You probably walked over to the park, right? As opposed to driving your car there. So that's not what I was looking for. I wanted to see how they were going to manage tournaments and what kind of vehicle impact they would have. So, like others, I want to say that there's nothing wrong with unstructured green space. It's one of the things that our community values, and I think no one should assume that we want to put up every little piece of nuances around recreation on every piece of green space. Our community is a healthy community, and we have to balance all users, and so I won't be supporting this project.
Councillor Wergeland?
Thank you very much. Last but not least, they say, I'd like to thank all members of the audience for taking the time to come out and, I shouldn't say ensure, but enjoy the last 3 meetings. And I'm pleased and thankful for the positive and informative input that we did receive, and appreciate it very much. As I was sitting here, I couldn't help but think, next Saturday I'll be in Nicaragua and Central South America on a building project in one of probably the poorest areas in Central America. But what's interesting, as I sat here, I couldn't help but think how blessed we are as a community. Here we are talking about clay courts, and I don't think that's going to be on top of their minds in Nicaragua. But I don't think we should ever forget how fortunate we are to live in a place and in a municipality such as Saanich. Something I also wondered about when I sat here, I wondered what the public consultation and the public hearing looked like and sounded like when they bought the farm and wanted to put a golf course on it. I think that would have been interesting. I also remember when I was first elected a number of years ago, and a lady phoned me up just before a council meeting, and she said, "Councillor Wergeland, there's this item on the agenda, and it's not a good thing, and I hope you won't support it. And I just want you to know I did vote for you in the last election." 2 days later, a gentleman called me and he said, "Councillor Wergeland, there's an item on the agenda." And he said, "It's a very good thing." And he said, "I think you should vote for it and support it. And I just want you to know I did vote for you in the last election." So over the last 18 years, things haven't changed a whole lot at public meetings, so appreciate it. Some have criticized the process that we have had, and when I look at all the members of the community that have had an opportunity to come and to speak and address council, and all the members of the community who have had a chance to come and listen to fellow residents, I think what we have here is part of an amazing process, and we're very fortunate to have it. Coming back to staff, sometimes it's easy to be critical of staff, but you can never forget that it's council that makes the decision. So if there is a criticism, you really need to address it at council. I think it's important. I, for one, believe most of what the proponents have shared with us over the last 3 days. And I believe it'll bring tennis to a new level. There's no question about it. But I also believe, and I've made the statement quite often, every choice we make, there are trade-offs. And as we make our choices, we have to make sure we're trading up and not down. And there have been some negatives as I've listened both to the community and listened to proponents. The footprint of 8 courts is large. Too many tax dollars going into this development. And unlike soccer and baseball fields, this proposal has a single use, and that's for tennis. Although the general public receives 1,500 hours of playtime, this is still a private club, no matter how we interpret the word private. And I think for many, the word private has, I shouldn't say tripped us up, but it's just created a question, what does it really mean? And the question has been asked, is it really different from baseball and soccer groups that we support financially, where you pay the annual dues to play? And again, I say, yes, I believe there is a difference, because the word private is in there, whatever that might mean. There are other concerns that have been expressed, but in my mind, many of them can be mitigated. Coming back to the financial concerns, I believe that can be mitigated and addressed. Bunker Creek, a lot has been said about that, and I believe that too, many of the issues that we've heard, I believe they can be mitigated also. Same with lighting, and there are many items that, if this was to go through, they could be addressed in the process. There were 2 statements made by, I believe it was 2 ladies at the first meeting, and they stuck with me, probably above many of the other statements that have been made. And one was, what is the best use of the land that would benefit the largest number of people in Saanich? And another statement was, because it's flat and green, does it mean we have to develop it? And those are comments that I have to agree with. I've sat on the CRD Parks Committee for a number of years, and I, like all of council here and all of our directors, are strong proponents of acquiring parkland for future development, for future generations. And the idea and the concept is good. Where I differ sometimes, I strongly believe that just because we have the land, we don't necessarily have to develop it all today. And I believe we can leave some for the next generation. Likewise, I feel the same about this property. Should this proposal fail, I don't believe we have to rush out from here today and feel a great urgency to strike a committee to decide how we should develop this special flat green space. There will be a time in the future, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, when the community and the residents of Saanich will come together in a spirit of consultation and cooperation and say, yes, why don't we do this? It's okay to leave it, in my mind, as it is, unmanicured, and have it for a whatever. To throw a ball, a frisbee, kicking or catching a ball with friends or family, or just sitting and standing or looking at it and realizing how fortunate and blessed we are to live in such a great municipality. There are two main reasons probably why I can't support this afternoon, and they are these. There have been many that have spoken with great compassion on both sides. Some comments were factual, some not so factual, many could be's, might be's. But what concerns me most is that two strong sides have developed. Call it a division, but two strong sides have developed. And I believe there is too much information that is being misunderstood. And I believe that we have to take a deep breath, step back, and address some of the concerns and suggestions and misunderstandings that have been pointed out to us here today. And the second one, having clay courts, in my mind, is positive. I believe, though, it is and has a regional benefit. And I believe that when a proposal comes to a community and it has a regional and greater community benefit, I believe there needs to be a benefit for the immediate community in some shape or form. And I believe this benefit really hasn't been brought out and shown to the community, if there is one, and I believe there's work to do. Thank you again for coming out, and I don't support what is before us today. Thank you.
So I'm about to call the question on what will be a unanimous decision to not support this application. And this community has gone through a lot of discussion from the start of this proposal to the moment we reach now. I've tried to focus on making sure we have reasonable meetings, so I haven't written down thoughts of my own. But I can tell you I have always been concerned, and I have expressed to the applicants, that a proposal like this needs to be a win-win. And you've seen me quoted in the newspaper saying that a Parks and Recreation proposal especially needs to be a win-win for a community. And yes, I've been distressed to see the community divided, but it's a signal that this is not winning public support. My earliest memories of a park improvement was when I lived in the Coldstream Valley just outside of Vernon. And we actually lived on Coldstream Creek on an acre of land. It was a beautiful piece of land, sloped down to the creek. And we were next to a park, pretty much an undeveloped park, open space park, big open field, nice place to toboggan down the hill with Coldstream Creek going through it. Coldstream's a very rural community, still is now, fortunately. Not many people live there. But for the centennial, you all remember there were projects throughout our country, and not all of you, Dean. But there were projects in our country in 1967 where people came together and did centennial projects. And our little town, our little community came together and wanted to build a shelter in the park. Just not much to it, just a shelter. And I know they got a little bit of money from somewhere, probably the federal government. But they got a whole lot of volunteers out, and I can remember quite vividly my dad and other members of the community out there building the shelter. And when it was done, everybody felt the park was a better place. and there was an incredible sense of community. I think that's what's called a win-win with a park. That people come away feeling their park is a better place for the addition to it. And the more the proponents here kept working, the more opposition there was from people who were concerned about their park. So this no longer became about the difference between clay and rubber and asphalt and parking and a business plan and a grant and all these things that I really appreciate a lot of you folks got into, and council members too. But it never got past first base with me. And I know that's baseball, we're talking tennis. But it never got past the first question. Are we looking at this and saying our park is a better place? And the applicants needed to have that kind of dialogue with the community about, is this considered to be an improvement to the park? Is this an improvement to Saanich Parks and Recreation? It was never getting anywhere near a win-win. So I was dismayed to see this reach this point in time, because in many ways I think the applicants could have listened to those in the neighborhood, a neighborhood that I live in, and heard these voices and taken a step back and give it a serious second thought. Instead, we've reached the point in time here where it's simply being defeated. And that's the appropriate decision I completely support. So with that, councillors, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of the motion to not approve? Everybody's hands up. Any opposed to the motion? Nobody's hands up. That's unanimous. I'm going to ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Those in favor, opposed, carried. Everybody go home and catch some of that sunshine.